She laughed at divorce court. He exposed her crimes, and she received 18 years in federal penitentiary. Can you hear the laughter that shatters a man's soul? Picture Michael Hayes, standing on a rain-soaked sidewalk, his life in suitcases strewn across the grass, while his wife, Lauren, and her lover, Derek, mock him from the doorway of the home he built. Worthless and broke, she sneers, her voice a blade slicing through years of love and sacrifice. But what if Michael isn't the broken man they think? What dark secrets has he uncovered in the shadows of their betrayal? As Lauren's lies unravel, a storm brews, one that will shake the foundations of her carefully crafted facade. Why does Michael's calm gaze unsettle her? What's hidden in the files he's been quietly compiling? The air hums with tension, a ticking bomb of truth waiting to detonate. This isn't just a divorce. It's a high-stakes game of deception, where one wrong move could cost everything. Will Michael's calculated silence lead to Lauren's downfall? Or will her venomous charm outmaneuver him? As the courtroom looms, the question isn't who will win, but who will survive the explosion of secrets about to ignite. I swear, Michael, you're worthless and broke. Just leave already. That's what my wife screamed in my face as she flung my last suitcase out the front door and onto the sidewalk. Her new boy toy, a smug real estate agent named Derek, stood beside her in nothing but his designer briefs and a crooked smile. They laughed, both of them, while my entire world collapsed. I stood there on the cold pavement in front of the house I'd spent years building, mortgage after mortgage, sacrificed every goddamn weekend to fix gutters, mow lawns, build shelves, paint rooms for her, for us. You're drowning in debt, she spat, tossing my suits onto the wet grass like garbage. I don't even want to share in the divorce, just vanish. That line. I didn't sleep that night, didn't cry either. I just sat in the guest room of my buddy's place, staring at the ceiling fan turning slow like it was mocking me, and thought, how the hell did it get to this point? It wasn't always like that. Back when I first met Lauren, she was magnetic, blonde hair that shimmered in the sun, eyes like bottled poison, and a voice that could cut through concrete. She was dangerous, but I thought I could tame her. Turns out you don't tame snakes. You just wait for the bite. The signs started 3 months before the explosion. She got busy at night, late girls' nights. Phone flipped face down on the kitchen counter. She started wearing red lipstick again, something she hadn't touched in years. I'm not an idiot, but I was in love, or at least addicted to the illusion. One night, she came home smelling like expensive cologne, the kind I don't wear. Said her friend spilled something on her at dinner. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. But her blouse was buttoned wrong and her neck was flushed. You don't need to be Sherlock to know what's up. The next week I followed her. Not proud of it, but I did. She told me she was going to a spa downtown with Rachel and Sophie. Even showed me a screenshot of the appointment, but I'd seen that. Same screenshot saved in her favorites album 2 weeks ago. She wasn't going to a spa. She drove to a gated community in Brentwood, parked, walked up to unit number 14 like she'd lived there her whole life. Derek opened the door, shirtless, grabbed her by the waist, and they kissed like they hadn't seen each other in years. That kiss broke something inside me. I didn't confront her that night. I wanted more. I wanted proof. I wanted blood. So, I documented everything. Dates, times, photos, GPS screenshots, even audio, thanks to a tiny recorder tucked in her purse the next day. It didn't take long to catch her saying things like, Michael's clueless. He still thinks we're going to counselling. He's weak and broke. Derek's already helping me set up the new place. He's not a man. He's a fucking doormat. I saved it all. Then came the morning. She served me coffee with oat milk, just like always. Smiled like she wasn't fucking another man 3 nights a week. That's when I told her, I know about you and Derek. She blinked, took a slow sip of her coffee. So? That so hit harder than anything I'd ever been punched with. That word carried 22 months of lies, fake apologies, pity kisses, and cold dinners. "You're disgusting," I said. "And you're broke," she snapped. "Do you really want to get into this? You want me to tell everyone how pathetic you've been, how I faked it just to avoid the silence?" Silence. I packed my things that night. She made sure Derek was there to help throw them out. Then came the next morning. Derek and Lauren were at the kitchen table sipping fresh-pressed juice, scrolling, Redfin for houses, laughing like villains in a bad soap opera. Then the headlines dropped. Local startup bought for $400 million, founder Michael Hayes becomes overnight tech mogul. They both froze. Their eyes hit the screen. My face, my name. The man they laughed at yesterday just became richer than both their families combined. They didn't know I'd sold the patent last week. I'd been working in silence, fueled by every insult, every lie, every roll of her eyes. Lauren dropped, her glass. Juice sprayed across the table. Derek's jaw went slack. And I just stood outside the window sipping black coffee, watching them scramble as my revenge was just beginning. The night I found the first real clue was the night I finally accepted that my marriage was a con. It was a Friday. Lauren told me she was going out with the girls for a wine tasting downtown. Said she might stay over at Sophie's place, not to wait up. I nodded like a fool, kissed her cheek like I hadn't already started building the case against her, and watched her strut out in that tight crimson dress I hadn't seen in over a year. Here's the thing, she only wore that dress when she wanted to impress, not just casually drink rosé with Sophie, who dressed like she was allergic to fashion. She left at 7:03 p.m. By 7:15, I was in my car. I knew where Derek lived, found out through a friend who worked in real estate. I parked 2 blocks away and waited. It was almost boring sitting there in the dark, chewing on bitterness. But when Lauren's car pulled up and she walked up his driveway with a bottle of wine and a bag that definitely wasn't overnight clothes, I knew I'd crossed the point of no return. I took pictures, videos. She didn't knock. She didn't hesitate. He opened the door and they kissed right there. In the glow of the porch light, like they were proud of it, I waited for hours. At 1:17 a.m., the lights inside went dark. She didn't come out. She stayed the night. I drove home in silence, gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I didn't even feel like crying. Just this burning pressure behind my eyes. Rage, humiliation, betrayal. You know how people say heartbreak is emotional? No, it's physical. It hurts. The next morning, Lauren returned home around 10 a.m. She smelled like lavender and woodsy cologne. Derek's signature. Stench. I watched her lie without blinking. "We got so tipsy I couldn't drive," she said. "Sophie insisted I stay." "Sophie," I repeated, pretending to scroll through my phone. "I'll thank her later." She smiled. "Sure," she said. "You're a sweetheart." Sweetheart. The way she said it felt like she was carving the word into my skin with a blade. Over the next 2 weeks, I played the part. Loving husband, distracted tech founder. I made her breakfast, told her she looked beautiful, kissed her goodbye every morning, and every time she walked out I tracked her. Every lie, every late work meeting, every therapy appointment. It all led to Derek. She wasn't even clever about it. She once texted me stuck at Costco, long line, while she was literally sitting poolside with Derek, drinking mojitos. The GPS on her phone showed the exact location. I had screenshots of everything. Still, I waited. Why? Because pain sharpened me. Every moment I saw her smile at him, hug him, touch him, it turned me colder, harder. I wasn't going to shout. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to bury them. I started gathering every asset, every financial record, every business document, moved shares, called lawyers, set everything in motion while she was too busy faking moans in another man's condo. And then I planted the final bait. I told her we were in trouble financially, said my startup's funding had collapsed, that we might have to sell the house. Her eyes flickered, not with sympathy, but with relief. That was all I needed. She wanted out, but she also thought I was broke. Perfect. She began pressing me for divorce 2 days later, said she couldn't live with the stress. I signed the papers without blinking. She thought she won until the news dropped. She stood in the living room the next morning, Derek beside her in boxers, both holding their phones with expressions like they'd just seen a ghost. My face was everywhere. Forbes, Bloomberg, NBC. The broke loser had just cashed out $400 million, and that was just the beginning. I didn't plan on confronting her that morning. I had imagined it 100 different ways, yelling, throwing things, telling her exactly what I thought of her and her sleazy boyfriend. But the headlines did it for me. Local tech founder scores $400 million exit. Michael Hayes sells AI patent to global firm in surprise deal. My name was on every screen. My photo, my story, the same guy she called pathetic, now had a net worth big enough to make the mayor call me personally. And Lauren, well, she couldn't wrap her fake lashes around the fact that I hadn't said a word about it. I walked back into the house like I forgot my keys. She was standing in the kitchen, frozen, holding her phone like it was made of acid. Derek looked like he'd swallowed a cactus. "You lied," she hissed, voice trembling. "You cheated," I replied calmly. She threw her phone across the room. "You let me believe you were broke, you manipulative asshole." I laughed. I couldn't help it. "You faked being faithful for a year. I played broke for a month. Who's the better liar, Lauren?" She stormed up to me, all fury and perfume, like she was going to slap me. "You're a fraud. You're a goddamn coward." "And you," I said, staring right into those icy blue eyes, "are a gold-digging snake who couldn't keep her legs closed long enough for me to close the deal." That landed. She flinched. "Derek and I are in love," she snapped. I nodded slowly. "I know. That's why I recorded you two lovebirds moaning through the drywall." Her eyes widened. "You what? Audio, video, GPS screenshots, messages, voice recordings, all legal, all admissible." Derek finally spoke, stepping forward. "You're bluffing." I looked at him, letting the silence stretch. Then I pulled out my phone and played the clip. Lauren's voice, breathless, saying, "He's such an idiot." I moaned his name once just so he'd feel useful. Derek went pale. Lauren looked like she'd been hit by a truck. I ended the recording and slid the phone back into my pocket. "You smug little bitch," I said. "You really thought you could humiliate me, walk out with your boy toy and get a nice cash out from the divorce. I don't want your money," she barked, arms crossed. "Keep it. I don't need anything from you." "You'll be getting something," I smiled, stepping closer. "A federal lawsuit. Mail fraud, wire fraud, defamation, property theft. You used company assets to fund your hotel stays with him, and you signed your name." Lauren's face drained of all color. "You're bluffing," she whispered. "Nope. My lawyers filed this morning." Her lips trembled. "You're doing this just because I moved on." "No, Lauren," I said, voice low. "I'm doing this because you humiliated me, because you laughed while throwing my life onto the pavement, because you told your friends I was less than a man." I turned to walk out the door. This isn't revenge. This is accountability. But just before I stepped outside, I glanced back and added, "Oh, and Lauren." She looked up. "Good luck explaining to your new boyfriend why you're going to federal court for 18 charges of fraud." Derek looked at her like she just turned into a grenade. I left them in that silence, the sound of their happy little world collapsing like a house of cards in a hurricane. And for the first time in months, I felt alive. The truth is, no amount of revenge could erase what I felt after everything came crashing down. For weeks after walking out that door, I didn't feel powerful. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt empty, like someone had ripped out a piece of my soul and left me walking around with a hole in my chest. Yeah, I won. On paper, I won everything. The money, the headlines, the respect. People who once ignored me now scrambled to shake my hand. I was suddenly this tech genius, this overnight success. But none of them saw the bruises under the armor. No one saw how I'd wake up at 3 a.m. reaching for her out of habit. How? I still made 2 cups of coffee every morning, forgetting she was gone. or how sometimes I caught myself wondering if any of it had ever been real. She was my wife. I let her into every corner of my world. She knew my childhood fears, my ambitions, the stories I'd never told another soul. And she used them like weapons. That betrayal, not the cheating, but the mockery. That's what broke something inside me. I started second-guessing everything. Was I not enough? Did she ever really love me? Was she faking the smiles, the laughter? The night she whispered, "I'm proud of you," into my neck. I kept replaying the moment she looked at me and said, "You're worthless and broke." Not because it was cruel, but because she meant it. She wanted me to believe I was nothing so she could justify what she'd done. Some nights I stared at the ceiling thinking about the first time we met, the bar in San Diego, the spilled drink, the way she laughed when I offered to buy her another. She had this fire back then. I thought it was passion. Turns out it was just gasoline waiting for a spark. And still, despite everything, I missed her. Not the real her, but the version of her I fell in love with. The version that probably never existed. It's funny how heartbreak doesn't hit you all at once. It leaks in slow, like water through cracks in a dam. First it's a photo, then a song. Then suddenly, you're sitting in your $1,000,000 condo, crying into a bourbon glass, wondering how you got played like a damn fool. I couldn't talk to anyone about it either. My friends were all, "Dude, you dodged a bullet." My lawyer, "You crushed her in court, man. She'll be lucky to afford toothpaste in prison." But no one ever said, "Are you okay?" Because no, one expects the guy who won to feel broken. There was one night, maybe 2 months after she was officially indicted, when I hit rock bottom. I was sitting on my balcony, scrolling through old photos, and I found one of her asleep on the couch with our dog curled up on her stomach. Her lips were slightly parted, no makeup, just peaceful, and I lost it. I sobbed, ugly, chest-wrenching, sobs that shook my ribs and made me want to rip my own heart out because no matter what she did, I loved her. I loved her with the kind of raw, unfiltered love that only a fool gives. And she lit it on fire, laughed while it burned. But grief is strange. It cleanses you. Eventually, the tears stopped. The ache dulled. The memory stopped feeling like blades and started feeling like lessons. I wasn't healed, but I wasn't drowning either. I was floating. And for the first time in a long time, I realized that version of me, she broke. He wasn't coming back, and that was a good thing. After the emotional fog started to lift, I knew I had to make some hard choices. Not just about Lauren, but about who I was going to be after all this. I had spent years building a life with her. Every plan I made, every risk I took, every win, every failure, it all had her in mind. And now I was sitting on a mountain of money in a valley of emotional wreckage asking myself, what now? Divorce was already underway. But I didn't want it to just be a legal separation. I wanted it to be a complete severing. No shared friends, no shared memories. I even switched my grocery store just to avoid bumping into anyone who might ask how she was doing. She had been arrested 2 weeks after my last conversation with her. The feds had taken over once we provided proof that she had knowingly used my company's internal funds, travel expenses, luxury stays, even minor embezzlement, through fake reimbursements. Derek had signed off on some of them as her business partner. And suddenly they weren't just cheaters, they were criminals. I had a decision to make too. Push the charges or walk away now that I had won. Everyone advised me to drop it. You're rich, man. Move on. She's already humiliated. But I couldn't, because the way she laughed when she threw my suits into the rain, the way she looked at me like I was subhuman, the way Derek snickered like I was just the stepping stone to their future, that wasn't just personal. That was predatory. So, I chose war. We pressed every charge. My lawyers were brutal, cold, calculated, and hungry. They found paper trails I didn't even know existed. The more we dug, the more we realized this wasn't just a one-time betrayal. Lauren had been slowly siphoning money from my accounts for months. She forged signatures, used private assets for her business dinners with Derek, even filed a fake document under my name to register a side company with him using my software. I felt sick when I read it, but I also felt clarity. This wasn't a woman who made a mistake in love. This was a woman who wanted to replace me, who thought I was going to fade quietly into nothing while she took what I built and handed it to a man who hadn't worked a day for it. No, I wasn't just getting divorced, I was erasing her. So, I made another decision. I started therapy. I know, sounds cheesy, but after everything, I needed to figure out how the hell I let someone like her get so close, why I ignored the signs, why I stayed, why I loved her even when I knew something was wrong. My therapist, a blunt woman named Dr. Linda Carter, said something in our second session that stuck with me. You weren't dumb. You were committed. People like her prey on that. She was right. I wasn't stupid. I was loyal to a fault. And Lauren took that loyalty and drowned it in lies. I also made the choice to stay quiet publicly. People reached out, media, bloggers, podcasts. They wanted my side of the story. Some even asked if I'd do a documentary. I declined them all. Why? Because I didn't want her name to live in my victory. I wanted her erased, forgotten, rotting behind bars while I lived better than ever. Not as the man who was cheated on, but as the man who survived her. I sold the house, bought a place in Sonoma. Quiet, private, surrounded by vineyards and silence. No more designer furniture, no more joint bank accounts, no more lies, and no more Lauren. She made her decision when she laughed at my pain. Now I was making mine, and this time I was choosing me. The day Lauren was officially sentenced, I wasn't sure what I expected. Maybe I thought I'd feel triumphant, or even vindicated, like I had finally won everything she took from me. But as I sat in that courtroom, the air thick with the smell of cheap cologne and stale paper, I realized that no amount of punishment would ever undo the damage she had done to me. She stood there, shackled, her face pale but defiant. She glanced around, meeting eyes with a few people in the room, her parents, some of her old friends. But when her gaze met mine, it was full of venom, full of the same contempt I had seen the day she tossed my belongings onto the street. But now she wasn't in control anymore. Now she was just a woman who'd been caught, a criminal about to pay the price for the twisted web of lies and deceit she had spun around my life. The judge spoke. The gavel struck. And Lauren, the woman who had once mocked me, who had laughed while I drowned in debt and betrayal, was sentenced to 18 years in federal prison. 18 years. I remember how her eyes widened as the sentence was read. For a moment she looked stunned, as if she couldn't believe it. Then came the anger, the same cold fury she always used when she felt cornered. She turned to me, her lips curled into a spiteful smile. You think this changes anything? You think this is justice? She spat, her voice dripping with disdain. You've taken everything from me, but you'll never take my freedom, Michael. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Her words were hollow. She'd said them 100 times before, but now she had nowhere to go with them. No audience, no stage, just a jail cell waiting for her. I stood there. Not because I wanted to bask in her defeat, but because I needed to let the moment sink in. The rage, the hurt, the betrayal. It was all finally turning into something I could leave behind. In that moment, I realized something that had eluded me for so long. The only way I could truly win was to let go. Let go of the anger, let go of the resentment, let go of the need for her to pay for what she did. I had spent so long letting her control the narrative, letting her taunt me, belittle me, make me question my worth. But now, I was done. I didn't need her apology. I didn't need her regret. The real victory wasn't in her suffering. It was in my freedom. Walking out of that courtroom, I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel joy. I just felt nothing. A quiet peace. The aftermath was quieter than I thought. The people who used to gossip about me now stayed out of my way. Lauren's old friends who once adored her started reaching out to apologize. They'd seen her for who she truly was, and they were ashamed of how they had enabled her. I didn't want their pity. I didn't want their sympathy. I had everything I needed: the money, the house, the freedom, and more importantly, I had the closure I had craved for so long. For the first time, I felt like I could breathe again, but it wasn't just about her. It was about me, about how I had spent years molding myself into someone else's idea of what I should be, and how, in the end, that person wasn't even real. Now, I was finally finding out who I was. I started traveling to places I'd always wanted to see: Paris, Tokyo, Buenos Aires. No more waiting for someone else's approval. No more compromising for someone who never deserved me. I started focusing on my business again. But this time, it was different. It wasn't about impressing anyone. It was about doing things for me. I got involved in a project that had nothing to do with tech, but everything to do with art and creativity. I bought a small vineyard in Sonoma. It wasn't the life I had planned, but it was the life I was building for myself now. And in the quiet moments, when I was sitting on the back porch of my new home, sipping wine and watching the sunset, I realized something. I was finally free. The woman who had tried to destroy me, she was locked away, her life shattered by her own choices. But I was moving forward. A year had passed since the court hearing. It felt like a lifetime, and at the same time, like no time had passed at all. The life I'd been forced to rebuild was now my own, untainted, free from the weight of a relationship built on manipulation and lies. But the deeper I went into this new chapter of my life, the more I realized that the work wasn't just about fixing the pieces of my life Lauren had shattered. It was about discovering who I was without her. The world had changed. The people around me had changed. And somewhere along the way, I had changed too. The first few months after the sentencing, I spent most of my time in a haze of numbness. There were moments of clarity, sure, but they were fleeting. The grief, the anger, the confusion. It all felt like a part of me that I couldn't just shake off. But I kept moving forward, one day at a time, focusing on the immediate things. My new home, my growing business, the renovations to the vineyard I had bought on a whim. Then it happened. I ran into one of her old friends, Jessica, the one who had always seemed like she had my back, always telling me how much she admired how patient I was with Lauren. Jessica was the one who had insisted that Lauren just needed space whenever I'd complained about her late nights and distant behavior. She had texted me out of the blue, asking if we could meet for coffee. I didn't want to at first. The thought of seeing someone tied to her felt like reopening old wounds. But there was a part of me that felt curiosity, maybe even a bit of closure. I agreed. Jessica was sitting in the corner of the cafe when I arrived, sipping on her latte like she had all the time in the world. When she saw me, she stood up quickly, like she'd been waiting forever, her smile wide but strained. She looked nervous. "I'm sorry," she started, before I could even say anything. "I know this must be hard for you. I know I wasn't the best friend. I should have seen what was going on with Lauren, and I'm sorry." I stared at her for a long moment. She seemed genuine, but I wasn't sure if that was enough to undo the years of enabling, the years of ignoring the truth, because it was easier to stay on the sidelines. "Don't apologize to me," I finally said, my voice cold, though I didn't mean for it to be. "You didn't hurt me, she did, and you let her." She flinched, but she didn't back away. "I know, I don't expect you to forgive me, but Michael, I wanted to tell you the truth about everything. You deserve that. The truth. The thing I had been hunting for. The thing I had tried to find in every moment of our marriage. What was real? What was a lie?" Jessica leaned in closer, lowering her voice, glancing around like she didn't want anyone to overhear. "Lauren was always like this. I know you think she changed, but she didn't. She played you, Michael, the whole time. I felt the air in my lungs freeze. "You weren't the first," she whispered. "There were others. Derek was just the most recent. She's been cheating since the beginning of your relationship. She never loved you, not like you loved her. She used you." The weight of her words crashed down on me. I had always suspected something like that, but hearing it from someone who had witnessed it, someone who had been complicit in it, it was almost too much. "I thought I could save her," I muttered, more to myself than to Jessica. "I thought if I was just good enough, patient enough." She reached across the table, her hand lightly touching mine. "Michael, you were more than enough. You were everything she needed. You just weren't what she wanted. She never wanted you to be her partner. She just wanted you to be her puppet." Her words felt like a punch to the gut. But for the first time in a long while, it wasn't just the pain that hit me. It was the realization that I didn't need to carry this weight anymore. I didn't need to live in the shadow of someone who had lied and cheated and twisted everything I gave her into something selfish. I took a deep breath and pulled my hand back from Jessica's. "You're right. I spent so long trying to fix something that was never broken. I'm done with her. I'm done with all of it." Jessica's face softened. "I know. You've made it. I can see it in your eyes, Michael. You've healed, and you're finally free." She was right. I was free. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't just free from Lauren. I was free from the version of myself I had been before her, the broken man who thought his worth depended on someone else's love, the man who needed her approval. No, I didn't need anyone to define me. I had learned through all the pain and betrayal that I was enough on my own. And that was something no one could ever take from me. The last few months had been a strange mix of liberation and introspection. I spent more time alone than I'd ever been comfortable with. But in that solitude, I found pieces of myself I had buried for too long. No one to impress, no one to live up to, just me. And that felt strange at first. But the more I embraced it, the more I realized how much I had missed the person I used to be before Lauren, before the chaos. Life had a way of breaking you down and rebuilding you if you let it, and I was finally ready to let it. I had made progress. I had taken the business I built from the ground up and redirected it into new projects, ones that mattered to me. I wasn't driven by the need to impress anymore. The startup was a success, but it no longer consumed me. Now, I was diving into ventures I had once shelved, from tech innovation to philanthropic work. I wanted to create things that made a difference, not just things that made money. But there was still that lingering question, what now? The thought came to me one evening as I sat on my vineyard's porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon, casting the rolling hills in soft golds and purples. I had the luxury of time now. The world was quiet here, far away from the noise of the past. And in that peace, I felt a stirring. It was a new kind of yearning, not for her, not for Lauren, but for something deeper, something I'd never had time to explore. I started traveling more, not just for business, but for me. I went to places that inspired me, things I'd always dreamed of experiencing, but never had time for. I saw the northern lights in Alaska, explored the ancient ruins of Peru, and hiked through the Rockies. Each step away from my old life brought me closer to a new version of myself, a version that was no longer tainted by betrayal or the need to prove anything to anyone. But the real shift happened when I decided to go back to college. I enrolled in a few philosophy and history courses online, thinking it might be a good way to challenge myself in ways I never had before. The more I read, the more I discovered about myself and the world around me. I realized how much I had limited my own growth by being so focused on external success and, to be honest, on someone else's expectations. The things I had learned in the months after Lauren's betrayal began to sink deeper. Lessons about strength, about vulnerability, and about the importance of letting go. It wasn't just about moving on from her. It was about understanding the role I had played in letting myself be taken for granted. And through that understanding, I started to heal in ways I hadn't even realized were possible. I was becoming whole again. And then one day, I met her, someone new. Her name was Olivia, and she was nothing like Lauren. She had the kind of quiet confidence that came from being comfortable in her own skin. She wasn't trying to impress anyone, and she didn't need anyone to complete her. She was already complete. We met at a charity event I had been invited to speak at. I was there to give a keynote about the future of tech. But I ended up spending most of the evening talking to Olivia about anything and everything, from the books we loved to our favorite places to visit. There was no pressure, no expectations, just two people having an authentic conversation. She made me laugh. She listened with genuine interest. And for the first time in years, I felt like I could be myself completely, without the fear of judgment. We exchanged numbers that night. But I didn't think much of it. I wasn't looking for a relationship. I wasn't looking for anything. But I found myself texting her the next day, and soon we were meeting up for dinners, walks, and even long talks under the stars. It wasn't love at first sight. It was something more gradual, something that felt steady, safe, and real. She didn't need me to rescue her, and she didn't want to change me. We both had our baggage, our stories, but we weren't carrying them into each other's lives as burdens. Instead, we were sharing them as equals, as people who had learned from their past but weren't defined by it. And in that, I realized something important. Love didn't have to be about fixing someone else or being fixed by them. It was about two people choosing each other, choosing to show up without the need for validation, without the games, without the expectations. Lauren had taught me hard lessons. She had shown me how not to love. And in the process, I had learned to love myself. Olivia was something different. She didn't complete me, but she made my life richer. She wasn't a solution to the pain I'd experienced. She was a new chapter in a story I was still writing. So here I was, someone who had been broken, rebuilt, and transformed. I wasn't the man I had been before Lauren. I was someone who had found his way, not just through the pain, but beyond it. And that felt like true freedom. In the wreckage of a heart betrayed, where love once stood like a monument now reduced to rubble, Michael Hayes found a truth that reshaped his existence. Freedom is not won by destroying another, but by reclaiming yourself. Lauren's deceit, her cruel laughter as she cast him out, was not the end, but the crucible that forged a stronger man. Her 18-year sentence was merely a footnote. The real victory was Michael's refusal to let her define his worth. Betrayal, he learned, is a brutal teacher, stripping away illusions to reveal the raw core of who you are. To those navigating their own storms of deception, heed this. Your pain is not your identity. Document the truth, not for vengeance, but to anchor your reality. Trust the quiet voice within that warns of danger, even when love blinds you. Build boundaries like walls, not to keep others out, but to protect the life you're rebuilding. Michael's journey taught him that love begins with self-respect, a flame that no one can extinguish. Let go of those who mock your value, for they reveal their own emptiness. Embrace the solitude that follows. It's where you rediscover your strength. Move forward, not to erase the past, but to write a future where you are enough. In that choice lies your liberation, a legacy of resilience no betrayal can steal.